Good evening, everybody. 6 o'clock. We'll get started right away. Welcome to the August meeting of the nonprofit Plant-Based Nutrition Organization of Wisconsin, or PBNOW. I'm Terry Lynch, your host. The mission of our nonprofit group is to educate, inspire, and support each other on an evidence-backed whole plant food-based nutritional path for health and improved quality of life. Our group's open to everyone, those plant-based and those just curious about it. And it's meant to be a non-judgmental place to come get information, inspiration, and support. If you'd like more information about our group, upcoming meeting dates, speakers, and resources, or to check out our videos and past meetings, just Google us at pbnow.org. As we do each time, can I see a show of hands, either by raising your hands or a thumbs up on the Zoom reaction icon to show how many are currently following a plant-based lifestyle? That's good. That's about half the group. And Mark would have your hand up if I'd asked a question before you get on there. As we mentioned at the beginning of each meeting, the evidence of the benefits of plant-based nutrition and improving health and quality of life for people of all ages, as published in non-biased medical research, is quite striking. I should add, all ages can be in the womb as well, if the mother is plant-based. Whether it's improving health through increased energy, weight loss, preventing, slowing, stopping, or reversing problems like allergies, digestive problems, diabetes, heart disease, and early dementia, or increasing our quality of life by helping us feel better quickly, strengthening our immune system, increasing our endurance, improving athletic performance, speeding recovery from exercise, reducing joint pain, clearing thinking, or reducing the physical, emotional, and financial side effects of the illnesses, drugs, and procedures often recommended to treat the conditions that plant-based nutrition can help us avoid. The research shows that our bodies do a wonderful job of healing themselves if we stop damaging them with poor nutrition on a daily basis and start giving them the nutrition they need to heal and to function optimally. It's truly remarkable. Now, let me tell you what's in store for you tonight. Tonight, we're going to see a video followed by a short group discussion and hear from one speaker. And as hopefully you saw in the email today, unfortunately, our initially scheduled speaker for tonight will not be able to speak because of COVID. So plant-based nutrition can help your immune system. It doesn't mean you're not going to ever catch anything. And unfortunately, our speaker caught something from their daughter. And that's strangely after treating patients since the beginning of COVID who had COVID and not getting it from them. So we'll see a 15-minute video, and we'll follow that with a group discussion. And our PBNOW Medical Director, Dr. Josh Liberman, has stepped up, and he will be our featured speaker after the discussion, which should start, he should start about 6:30. Our program should end by 7:30. And as a reminder, we have meetings every month, usually on the second Thursday of the month at 6 o'clock Central Time. Next month, we're going to hear from Distinguished Professor of Nutrition from Penn State University, Dr. Penny Chris Etherton, who is not only a teacher, but a researcher. She teaches graduate and undergraduates. She's a researcher who's published over 360 papers in peer-reviewed literature on nutrition, dietetics, and et cetera. And we're certainly looking forward to hear what she has to say. We'll be posting more information on our upcoming meetings on our website, pbnow.org. We have speakers committed through December. We haven't posted all of them yet. We just have our next speaker posted, but we should be posting those in the next couple of weeks. Our featured speaker tonight is a fellowship-trained cardiologist, past president and current trustee of the Wisconsin chapter of the American College of Cardiology. He's a member of the American College of Cardiology's National Nutrition and Lifestyle Work Group whose membership includes nationally known physicians such as Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and Dr. Neil Barnard. He's an advocate for the use of plant-based nutrition to help improve heart health, general health, and quality of life, and has seen the benefits of plant-based nutrition in both his personal life and that of his patients. We're fortunate to have him here in Milwaukee and as our PB Now medical director. I'm happy to welcome Dr. Joshua Liberman.
All right, thanks everybody. Sorry I kept you waiting. Just been a little bit of a crazy day. So, and then obviously Dr. Reddy wasn't able to attend because of COVID. So thank you for being here. As always, appreciate everybody's time. I know, almost 3 years into this. I feel like it's almost 3 years into this whole Zoom thing. We're getting tired of it. So hopefully we can get back and press the flesh and get back to seeing each other in real life. But with the remaining time I figured, oh, you have to share the screen with me, I think, Terry, so that, or let me take over.
Oh, that's right. I don't think let's see. Did I end? Nope, that's end meeting for all. Can everybody see Dr. Liberman?
We can see him in the gallery, just, thumbnail size.
All right, let me just see if I can change the gallery.
Can you assign me a co-presenter?
Oh, that's right. Okay, thanks. Make co-host. And here we go. Sorry about that.
Of course, no problem.
It's popping up here.
The suspense is making it dramatic. We'll see if it loads. Can you guys see that it says loading? Can you guys see that title screen? It's all in white.
We can now see Shaking the Salt Habit, okay. The impact of salt on your diet.
Yeah, so I apologize because I still think it's a useful talk. I give this talk to a lot of community groups. This group, it pertains a little bit less to because of how healthy a lot of the people on this call already eat. But this is a kind of a personal project of mine in the community, but also in my practice about just educating people on the impact of salt. You know that I've talked about this a couple times over the years already. And so at the last minute when Terry said that Dr. Reddy wasn't going to be available, I tried to pull something together for this group. So bear with me, and hopefully you'll learn something in this, even though it all doesn't pertain to you. I hopefully it'll be enjoying and educational, enjoyable and educational. So with that, can everybody hear me? Can everybody see it okay? You raise your hands or shake your head or anything? Okay, fine, fantastic. All right, so why do we care about sodium or salt? Well, we know that high rates of salt intake are linked to increased risk of a lot of different bad things, not just heart-related things like I care about. I mean, I care about a lot of things. But specifically my interests obviously are in the last two: congestive heart failure and high blood pressure. And we know definitively in this day and age that high rates of salt intake are linked to increases in blood pressure. And we know that decreasing your salt intake will lower your blood pressure. So salt or sodium can manipulate your blood pressure. We know that definitively. So then if I go on to tell you that high blood pressure is the major cause of cardiovascular disease, it's one of the major risk factors. It's responsible for the majority of strokes and almost half of all heart attacks, then it should make sense that salt would work for those things too, right? Because if salt manipulates blood pressure and blood pressure is important, then salt is important for those events. Does that make sense to everybody? Everybody agree? Okay. So we know that lowering your salt intake will indeed lower your blood pressure. And we should use less salt than we currently use. And the goal is to be under 1,500 milligrams a day. So thank you very much. That was my talk. That was quick, right? I was able to pull that together just today. All right, just kidding. I have more. Because the problem is that if I just tell you to use less salt, it's not enough. And why isn't that? Even for this group, depending on what you're eating in your whole foods plant-based diet, and I know that not everybody is doing that. but there's a lot of sodium stuff that we don't necessarily even realize. We think we're doing the right things, but we may be still taking in too much. And now, this is obviously not a problem for this group, but again, this is a talk that I give for a community group, so just bear with me. But I tell my community groups that I'm hoping for the day at some point in my career when I show this in front of a group of people and nobody has any idea what this is. Hasn't come yet. Hasn't come yet. But yes, this is the McDonald's Big Mac, and it has 1,000 milligrams of sodium in that alone. That monstrosity, that horrible thing, has 1,000 milligrams of sodium in it alone. So that's 2/3 of the day's recommended intake right alone there. And that's not including the fries or the soda or anything else, right? So if you get all that stuff, you're at your day's intake in that one meal. All right. So let's just do a little background, a little educational summary. So I get caught up in this. It's a mistake that I make, but salt is not the same thing as sodium. So let me let that sink in. Salt is not the same thing as sodium. Salt contains sodium. Salt is sodium chloride. Sodium plus chloride. Well, it turns out it's the sodium that's the biologically active substance. Chloride really is fairly inert. And so it's the sodium that carries with it the biological properties. So when you say salt, when you're talking about the biological properties of salt, you really are talking about the sodium, but they aren't the same thing. Salt is an element, sodium is an element in salt. Sodium is one of the two elements in salt. So I just need to say that I make this mistake in my everyday life. I make a mistake with my patients. I go back and forth between using the terms because in my mind, they're somewhat interchangeable only in that it's the sodium that has the biological activity. But you have to know that 1 teaspoon of salt is not a full teaspoon of sodium. It's actually about 2,000 milligrams of sodium. So just for comparison purposes, remember, we're all supposed to be under 1,500 milligrams. A teaspoon alone is more than you should take in a day. All right. So again, going back to historical times, our ancient ancestors consumed probably less than 250 milligrams of salt in a day, right? So again, we're recommending just to be under 1,500, but we used to take in a whole lot less than that. And really, the modern use of salt can be traced to about 5,000 years ago, when people in the Eastern Hemisphere discovered that it could be used to preserve food. And then, of course, with the advent of refrigerators and freezers, salt was no longer required for preservation. And actually, intake started to decline, but then we got into the modern food manufacturing process and a lot of processed foods, and salt consumption and use started to incline once again. Now, some people may say, well, maybe we've just adapted over the years. Maybe we've just evolved into needing more sodium. And the answer again is no. Current hunter-gatherer societies, and there are still a couple within the, on the planet, are estimated to live on less than 800 milligrams of sodium in a day. So again, it's not necessary. We could definitely survive on a whole lot less than we're. When we do that sodium, you want to get in? Well, it's very important actually for maintaining the amounts of fluid inside the cells and inside your bloodstream. And if you take in too much sodium, if your body had no ability to regulate the sodium concentration or make adaptations to account for the sodium concentration, if you took in too much sodium, all the fluid inside your cells would escape out into your bloodstream, and your cells would just collapse in. Like on those sci-fi movies when the submarine is goes way too low in the ocean and it just implodes under the pressure. That's what would happen to the cells in your body if you took in too much sodium and weren't able to adapt to it. Conversely, if you didn't take in enough and you weren't able to adapt, or if you just drank in way too much water, all the cells in your body would flood, it would swell with all that water, and they'd actually burst. Again, you can imagine both those situations are not good. And so the human body maintains exquisite control over the sodium concentration in the bloodstream. And so what is going to happen is if you take in a lot of sodium, your brain recognizes that as a threat to the continuity of your cells. It recognizes it as a threat, and it's going to make you drink a lot of water to correct the concentration in your bloodstream, right? which is fine. So your cells don't rupture, explode, or implode or whatever. But the problem is now you're walking around puffed out like the Michelin Man because you have all this fluid that you're retaining. So you have swollen ankles, you have fluid in your lungs, congestive heart failure, and of course you have higher blood pressure. You could say, well, wait a minute, if it's so terrible, like why does the industry use salt? Then again, the reason is it's a preservative. It's the cheapest preservative known to mankind. It also makes food way more, right? So how do most people, again, not on this group, but how do most people buy, say, for example, meat, right? It's by weight, right? You weigh, you say, hey, can I get a pound of chuck roast or something like that? And they weigh out a pound. Well, what they don't tell you is that they brine that meat or the chicken or whatever ahead of time in a salt solution. So it's going to suck in water. It's going to preserve it too. That's the reason they do it. But it also sucks in water, and it's going to make that same amount of meat way more, and so you end up having to spend more money. Functionally, it's the same thing it does in your body, right? You take in a lot of salt, water gets sucked in because you drink more, and you end up weighing more. But of course, one of the main reasons that a lot of the food companies use salt is that it masks all the bitter flavors that are created when you heavily process food, and that's most of the food that this country eats, unfortunately. Salt makes cheap, tasteless food edible at no cost. And that's what most of the country's eating. Again, hopefully not in this group, but most of the country's eating cheap, tasteless food. And, it shouldn't be a coincidence that salt is a major determinant of thirst. And many of the largest snack firms also sell soft drinks, right? Because like Pepsi owns Frito-Lay. So Pepsi wants you to drink more Pepsi. So what do? They make you chew a bunch, eat a bunch of salty snacks with it that make you thirstier and make you reach for more. So again, for most US adults, is under 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day. Of course, our average in this country is almost 4,000. Again, maybe not in this group, maybe, it depends. But that's obviously a whole lot more than is recommended. And again, that's an average, right? So just think about that. That means half the people are eating more than 4,000. And this is why I give this talk to communities probably once a month, once every 2 months. Different communities, different groups of people, is because the majority of people are completely unaware of the role that sodium plays in their health. 59% in this one survey said they weren't concerned about their intake. 70% didn't even know what the guidelines were. And only 38% thought that limiting sodium was actually even remotely important for a healthy diet. About half of people think that the sodium in the US diet comes primarily from table salt, which is not true. Most of it actually comes from salt that's already in the food we eat. And only a minimum of adults in this country were actually at the targets that are recommended. Another myth that's out there, and I get a lot of patients talking to me about this. They say, okay, doc, it's all right. I cut back on my salt, and now instead of table salt or kosher salt, I'm using sea salt because that's a lot healthier, right? I read somewhere that it was a lot healthier, and the answer is it's no. It has the same exact sodium concentration. Now, it might have some other minerals and colors and whatnot that make it a little bit more flavorful, who knows, or whatever. But the point is that it has the same biological effect. It has the same exact concentration of sodium. So my advice to patients is salt is salt is salt, whether it's garlic salt or lemon salt or seasoned salt or sea salt or whatever it is, it's salt. So you may be surprised. I have patients that say, hands when I give this to my office and say, but doc, if you tell me to not, that I can't use salt, I might as well die. I mean, I literally have had patients that say like, well, I might as well starve then because I'm not going to eat anything. As things, especially in this country where we take in so much, food may taste bland to you, will taste bland to you at first if you completely go cold turkey and really dramatically lower your salt intake. The good news is that taste buds are actually very smart, and they will recalibrate and adapt to the new lower sodium level. And it takes a couple of weeks, but things will start to taste salty to you. And I'll tell you, this happened to me too years ago. When I made the change in my diet and went to a much lower sodium diet, and then I think I went out with a bunch of buddies, like a month later, 2 months later, and got some French fries. And holy cow, I couldn't even eat them. They were so salty. And these are things that I'd gone for years with them without a problem in the past. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe how salty these things taste. But I tell patients that this is an excellent opportunity to just start experimenting with different flavors and spices. A lot of people honestly only think that salt is like the only spice that's out there. So yeah, 1500 milligrams. So where we get from, it's in everything. So again, people in this call may not be eating this, but a lot of people out there might be. And this has 900 milligrams of sodium per serving. And guess what? There's 2 servings in a can. Now, again, I don't know how many people out there are actually having a half a can of soup, whether it's vegan or not, and calling it a day. But the point is that you have to be aware of serving size, but you have to be aware of how much sodium is in these kinds of things. And you might say, well, yeah, but I only eat healthy organic stuff, right? I eat Amy's organic lentil vegetable soup, which by the way is vegan, right? Completely vegan, wonderful, tastes delicious, but oh my gosh, 1200 milligrams of sodium per can. 1200 milligrams. That's not per serving, that's per can in this. So just think about that even you could be doing what you think is the right thing, eating a plant-based diet, and you could still be taking in a whole lot of sodium. And I've said that throughout the years with you guys. So where do we get it from? Well, 75% of the sodium in our diets come from processed foods, breads that you might buy, cereals, baked goods, prepared foods. If you buy, some vegetarian dish from Sendix that's already made, and you just, because you're running late and you don't want to deal with buying something, and you say, oh yeah, Sendix has some like vegan or some options, vegetarian options, I'll just do that. Just be aware. And I'm not trying to say anything bad about Sendix, but just be aware, there's anything that's prepared for you is going to have a lot of sodium in it. These are the percentages of people that are not at recommended sodium limits. So what I want to highlight here is ages 2 to 4. Our babies are almost never at their sodium limits, right? Only 3% of male 2 to 4-year-old kids are at sodium limits. 97% are over the limits, right? The only groups that are doing pretty well are really women over the age of 60. Women over the age of 60, 28% of them are at sodium limits. But basically, everybody else across the board, it's a fraction of the people out there that are at sodium limits. Now, I haven't seen any data about people who are plant-based, so this may or may not pertain to this group. This was just an interesting study that was done a number of years ago about typical fast food places that people in this country eat. Again, you guys don't, but people do. And this was just the average sodium per average lunch meal. So this is not like, this is what real world stuff is. What they did was they just asked people walking out, these researchers stood by the doors of these restaurants, and as people walked out, they said, here, I'll give you a $2 gift card if you give me the receipt that you just, for the food you just bought. And so they tallied up what those receipts looked like in terms of what people were typically eating, and they figured out how much sodium. And again, all of these are over 1500, and some of them are way over 1500. Again, I'm not sure how many people are on this call are eating this stuff, but just, you can maybe feel some schadenfreude or whatever, that everybody else in the world is doing the wrong thing and you guys are doing the right thing. I have a lot of patients in my practice that say, Doc, I'm listening to you. I haven't been able to make the change to plant-based, but I did give up red meat, and I'm not eating red meat anymore. I'm eating turkey. And instead of going to McDonald's, I'm going to Subway. Isn't that good? And I'll say, yeah, I mean, I am proud of you for making that change. And it shows that you're trying, and it shows that and I do 100% believe that they have gotten healthier. Are they healthy? No, but they've gotten healthier. But again, they have to be careful. There's 900 milligrams of sodium in a 6-inch Subway turkey breast sub, right? And of course, in this country, a lot of people are doing the foot long, so you just got to do the math. All right, well, what about the Impossible Burger? Hey, Doc, I don't get the Whopper anymore. I get the plant-based burger. Isn't that great? And of course, the problem is, again, 1,000 milligrams of sodium in it. So you're not necessarily healthier just because you're doing a plant-based burger. All right, so this says reduced sodium on the top of the label, right? So this is, again, educational. I do, as I said, I give this talk to a lot of communities to try to teach them how to look at labels and what labels look like and what they mean. So what I ask is, if it says reduced sodium on it, is that safe? And the answer is not really, because by federal law, if it says reduced sodium on it, it only has to have 25% less than the original product. So if you start with a whole lot and you only take away 25%, you're still usually stuck with a whole lot. Okay, what about Dr. McDougall, right? Dr. McDougall is super wonderful and he sells all this stuff too. This says lower sodium on it. Is this safe? Well, again, read the label. It says about 50% less sodium than the competitive product, right? Lower sodium has no legal definition. So now at least Dr. McDougall is saying, well, this says 50% less than the comparable product, right? So he's trying to let you know that there's a significant amount less. But they could have 10% less and still call it lower sodium. Lower sodium has no legal definition. Okay, what about if it says low sodium, right? So not lower, not reduced, but just flat low sodium with this green little bar here. Is that safe? And the answer is yes. By federal law, if it says low sodium on it, it can have no more than 140 milligrams of sodium per serving. So that's what I teach my patients. Aim for things. If it comes in a box, a can, or bag, and again, we really shouldn't be eating a whole lot of stuff that comes in boxes, cans, and bags. But if you're going to eat something that comes in one of those containers, try to make sure it says low sodium on it. And it's important, right? I mean, for lots of reasons, but if you could reduce your sodium intake, there's a lot of research out there, but certainly this study says you could reduce your need for blood pressure medication by 30%. So if you're one of those people that's on 3 blood pressure medications, you could knock off one of them just by decreasing your sodium intake. We know that lower sodium diets can lower your blood pressure by 10 to 14 points. That's a big number. That's basically the equivalent of any medication out there. So what that means is if you go to see your doctor someday in the future and your doctor says, oh, Mrs. Smith, your blood pressure is running high, I think we have to put you on medication. You could say, oh, doc, time out, wait. How about I just really pay attention to the sodium in my diet and I'll come back to you in a couple months and I can measure it at home and I can let you know. And that'll lower your blood pressure, no question. There's been lots of intervention studies, lots of research studies looking at this, but this one was a nice one that I liked from a couple years ago. They took 2 similar villages in Portugal. They did vigorous health education to reduce salt in one village, and they achieved about a 50% salt intake reduction in salt intake between the 2 villages. So the one village that they did the educational intervention for successfully reduced their salt, and sure enough, after 2 years, the people in that village had about 13 points systolic lower blood pressure, which is exactly what we would expect. We know that lowering your salt intake will reduce your risk of a heart attack over a 10-year period by about 20%. That's a big number. And this is a really nice study that came out last year. This looked at, I think it was like 500 villages in rural China, 500 villages in rural China. And in half the villages, they replaced the salt that the people had with a salt substitute that was 75% sodium and 25% potassium. So it still actually tasted quite like salt. And it wasn't a huge difference. It was really just 25% less sodium. Just for understanding, potassium chloride is what Mrs. Dash is. So I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of Mrs. Dash. Mrs. Dash is potassium chloride. It's marketed as a salt substitute. There's no sodium in it. It's all potassium chloride. But people think that it tastes a little metallic, doesn't really taste the same. This product was 25% potassium chloride. So it was still largely sodium. But the rate of stroke was 14% lower. The rate of major cardiovascular events was 13% lower, and the rate of death was 12% lower in the villages that took this substitution. I mean, that's incredible to me. There are other trials that have looked at this too, and for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of rush through this. But this is again one of these intervention groups where they did one intense educational intervention to one group of people and not to another group, and then they watched what happened to their sodium intake over the years. And the 2 trials showed that in the groups that got the education, they were able to reduce their sodium intake by 2.6 grams in the first trial, and in the second trial by 2 grams. But I wanted to highlight that after the end of the trial, participants were not given any further advice, right? So the trial's over, you publish the results, and everything's hunky-dory, and you feel good about yourself that the education helped. But then some people said, well, let's look back 10 or 15 years later. And this was published a number of years ago. They went back to the original participants in the trial 10 to 15 years later. Again, they had no contact with them. They weren't monitoring. They weren't keeping up. They weren't reminding them to go low sodium. And the group that 15 years earlier had a 2-year period of low sodium, had a 30% reduction of developing cardiovascular events. So an intense 2-year educational intervention saved lives decades later, right? And so to be honest, I remember reading this trial when I was, early on in my career. And that's why I said, I need to start giving talks about this. I need to start educating people to see if we can make a difference, if, just on a small scale even. Because if you can impact something, if you can just make a small change in their diet like this, and this is even before I was plant-based, but I said, well, gee, this is powerful, I thought. There's been various statistical analyses that have come up, but basically the idea is that if we could just reduce sodium reduction by 1,200 milligrams a day, which doesn't even get us to our goal of 1,500, but we would reduce incident cardiac events by 50,000, 100,000, somewhere in that range. That's just incredible. Think about how many people that is. These are just numbers. Like, it doesn't really sink in. But let me put it in a different way. This is the equivalent of a jumbo jet airplane crashing every day for a year. That's how many lives are lost. I know it's a horrible thought. I apologize. But this is the amount of lives that are lost in this country because of our addiction to sodium. The same as a jumbo jet airplane crashing every day for a year. Now, that said, you may not have heard about the importance of sodium or how it's killing people or anything like that, right? But I guarantee, if we had a plane crash a plane crashing every day, we would fix that within days, right? I talk to patients, I talk to community groups, I say, listen, I would bet that on the third day, if you had God forbid, a plane crash, everybody's worried, if you had one a day later, right? Same thing. Two in 2 days would be horrible. I would bet money that by the third day, they would ground all air traffic and they would say, we need to get to the bottom of this. We cannot tolerate this. We need to do something about this, right? We cannot tolerate this many Americans losing their lives. 3 days, I think the problem would be fixed. But sodium, this is happening every day, year after year after year for decades, and we're not doing anything about it. It's in everything. 800 milligrams, and that's going. You might think you're doing a good job. I have patients that say, Doc, I gave up the bacon and sausage and eggs for breakfast. Now I just grab, a pastry on my way to work. Again, it is still probably healthier, but is it as healthy as it can be, as breakfast could be? No. I have patients that say, Doc, I gave up meat, but I'm only doing fish now. Great. I think that is a benefit, right? I think that that's way healthier than what they were doing. Again, is it as healthy as a plant-based? No, it's not. But I'm glad that they're eating fish. The problem is that in this community, sometimes that fish is a fish fillet sandwich with 1,000 milligrams of sodium in it. Right? So there's no question, the whole food plant-based diet with minimal processed foods, you're going to be fine. You're not going to have to worry. There is some natural sodium in stuff that grows in the ground, but it's nowhere near what the country is exposed to. I have patients that say, when I go to McDonald's now, Doc, I get the salad with the grilled chicken. Right? Grilled, that sounds healthy, right, Doc? Unfortunately, 1,000 milligrams of sodium in that, right? If you didn't get the chicken, you just got the salad, right? Sure. Then there's a very minimal amount of sodium in it. And of course, that does include the salad dressing. But why are you going to McDonald's for a salad? Just make it yourself. Okay. What about there's plant-based foods, are getting really popular. A lot of restaurants are coming out with them. Chipotle has a new plant-based pea protein, pea isolate, chorizo, right? It's quite yummy. I've had it. Problem is 1,300 milligrams of sodium in it, right? That's basically your sodium target right there. And certainly if you get any of the, chips and guacamole with it, you're done. And then it just goes up from there, right? So chicken Parmesan at Olive Garden, 3,000 milligrams of sodium in that one meal, right? That's 2 days worth of sodium in one meal. What about the vegetable lo mein, right? So, hey, Doc, I'm plant-based, but I'll go out and I'll have, vegetarian dishes at a restaurant. I get that, right? 3,300 milligrams of sodium in that, right? All right, what about TGI Friday's signature whiskey glazed burger, but with a Beyond Burger substitute, right? You can do that. TGI Fridays has Beyond Burgers, and you can get that. You can order without the cheese and without the bacon, and just get it. 3,600 milligrams of sodium in that monstrosity. What about, Red Lobster again? Probably people on this call aren't eating there, but 9,000 milligrams of sodium in that appetizer, in that entree. So now you can begin to understand why we have a blood pressure problem in this country. Because I have patients that come to me and say, Doc, I made a lot of changes, right? I only go out to eat now once a week, right? I'm eating healthy at home. I'm cooking. I'm doing all these wonderful things. I'm eating more salads. I'm like really a lot healthier. But once a week, I go out to a restaurant. Isn't that better? I used to go out 5 nights a week, or I used to get, all this. I'd say, yes, you've gotten yourself healthier, Mr. Jones. Absolutely. I'm proud of you. The problem is that one place you go to can give you enough sodium for the entire next week, which means that if you ate nothing else for a week and you only had this meal, you would still have just the right amount of sodium. But of course, we're not starving ourselves. We're not fasting for 6 days, right? That's the problem, is that you go out that one meal, you get 9,000 milligrams of sodium in that one meal. And then the next day you get 2,000, the next day you get 3,000, right? And we're constantly overloaded with sodium in our diets. Of course, the food industry is worried that if you take out the sugar and the salt and the cholesterol and the fat and all this stuff, you end up with an empty box, right? Because we are eating just a whole bunch of chemicals in this country. So what I tell my patients, what I tell my communities is, this is the most powerful picture, right? And you got to get to understand, you got to have to learn how to interpret this, right? So what is this magical food that has only 55 milligrams of sodium, a lot of dietary fiber, no cholesterol, no saturated fat? You'd be amazed at how many people have no idea that it says right at the bottom what it is. So many people do not know how to read food labels. This is a bag of carrots. So remember, 1,500. It's hard to do it as a human being, as an individual. There are governments that are doing this. So in Finland, they've been pushing since the 1970s to reduce sodium intake as a government program, kind of, in collaboration, not forcing, but in collaboration with food industry. And they've seen blood pressures fall. They've seen significant decreases in heart disease mortality and an increase of 5 to 6 years in life expectancy. The UK started a program in the early 2000s as well. And they've seen significant, and there's a lot of research studies published about the benefits that they've seen. Finally, in the U.S., after decades of begging for this kind of stuff, the FDA in October of last year came out with a guideline, a guidance to food industry to request voluntarily to work to remove sodium reduction down from 3,400 milligrams to 3,000, which is a small amount. But their goal is to do it so slowly that the population doesn't rebel and fight back that food now tastes bland. And they are getting buy-in from a lot of industries. So there's hope for us. There's hope for us. So make sure you're reading labels. If you're eating a high sodium diet, start to make gradual changes. Aim for 500 milligrams of sodium per meal. And if you focus certainly on whole food, plant-based kind of meals, it's definitely achievable. And just understand that even things we think are healthy, which again, you could say maybe, if you're a fan of the wheat belly diet, you don't think wheat is healthy. But the point is that everything has sodium in this country. If you're getting it, if you're not making it yourself, it has sodium in it. So that's the end. Thanks for your time, everyone. Yeah. So by the way, salt is really bad for snowmen.
All right. Josh, thanks so much. That was outstanding. I don't know about everybody else, but I was shocked at some of those sodium levels of things that I eat. Can everybody hear?
Yep.
So
maybe you just have muted them.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go. All right. And so I've got, let me just see here. I hear a couple questions, or one question from Valerie. Does potassium content affect sodium content in foods?
No. Potassium is actually, if anything, potassium is an element that can actually lower blood pressure. So plant-based foods is certainly vegetables and fruits have tons of potassium and potassium. Now, unless you have like a real severe kidney problem, potassium is great, and foods that are naturally high in potassium typically are lower in sodium.
So there's
Hope
a
that answers
question from Donna. What about, quote, no salt, unquote, the salt substitute? Are you familiar with?
Yeah, no salt is fine. That's usually, again, it's potassium chloride.
Bill, I think, or is that Rill? Said, I was looking at the ingredients in bottled lemon juice. There were 2 compounds which had the word sodium in them. You think?
Yeah, I guess I don't know specifically what you're referring to. It depends on how it's bound, whether it can dissociate freely. So if there's like some chemical preservative in the lemon juice that's like sodium acetyl acetate, I don't know, something like, I'm making stuff up, obviously. It doesn't necessarily have the same biological effect because it may not dissociate into sodium by itself. So it's hard to say.
See, I've got a question about iodine. I know that every so often there are vegans that or plant-based people following plant-based lifestyle who end up getting a little bit low on iodine, and that some people have recommended a little bit of table salt or iodized salt to get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's profoundly rare in this country to become so iodine deficient. It used to be very, very common in the 1800s. Actually, I don't know if anybody listens to podcasts or knows who Malcolm Gladwell is, but Malcolm Gladwell just did a podcast on or just an episode in his revisionist history podcast. It's a wonderful podcast, by the way, about the history of iodized salt and how iodine basically got in, it became a thing to iodize salt. Really wonderful. Malcolm Gladwell, revisionist history. I think he's on like season 6, but it's in this most recent season. Just was like a couple months ago, he did an episode. But the bottom line is that, yeah, I mean, that's one way to get iodine. We do need iodine in our bodies, but most vegans, I think, tend to get it through eating like seaweed or kelp or something like that. That there's plenty of iodine in that. So you don't have to necessarily go out and, guzzle down some table salt just for that.
Any other questions? Anybody else? Well, with that, Josh, do you have anything to add?
Just happy to be here with you guys. I love this community, and I'm happy to see, people coming out all the time and making time in their lives to meet as a group. And I'm really hoping we can get to the point where we can get back to seeing people in person and smiling and hugging and doing all the things that human beings need.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much for stepping up today with an excellent presentation. That's a real eye opener. And I'd like just remind everybody, our next monthly meeting will be Thursday, September 8th at 6 o'clock. Our featured speaker will be Penn State professor, Dr. Penny Chris Etherton. And if you'd like to receive notice of this or other upcoming PBNL events and are not currently on our list, you can register on the website at pbnow.org or by Googling us and clicking on the white Learn More button on our homepage. Also remember, if you'd like to check out our past meetings, just go to the video library section on our website. You can go back and watch entire talks or skim through and go to the parts of each talk that may be of particular interest to you. And thanks again, Dr. Liberman, for sharing your valuable time and knowledge with us tonight. And good night, and thanks everybody for coming.